Alrighty, I'm gonna kick this off. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining this session. My name is Krishna Kunipareddy, and I'm the program manager at NATO. It's been over a year I joined NATO, and most of you might have known Kerry and Brett, who are in the transportation field at NATO. Um, with this, I'm gonna turn it over to Robert. Hey, Robert.
All right, how's everybody doing today? Okay, so welcome to our virtual peer exchange. Uh, they asked me to say a couple of opening words here a little bit. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Those of you who have been around the block for a while, thanks for your participation today. Real quickly, for those who may be new, just a little bit about RPO America itself. Um, RPO America is really an affiliate of NATO, and we serve as a peer professional network for transportation planning professionals or other transit transit planning, pretty much transportation advocates in general, and other transportation partners in rural and small metro areas. So we really work year in, year out to try to ensure that we're developing things such as policy positions for um, legislation or reauthorization or issues that are important to transportation planning or other modes of transportation. And then we're doing other things um, to help move peer learning and professional development along. Um, we do our annual conference each year, which that's coming up in July. So hopefully y'all have been seeing the news and alerts on that. If you haven't, be sure to check out the NATO website under the events section. They've got the info for the conference here. Carrie's cat needs a transit bus to come get it there. It looks like it missed its stop, but but anyway, so this is a good network, and I would say this is the first year that we've really moved into doing a lot more virtual things. So we're excited about that. We're excited you're participating. We hope to do more of it. And so I think I will just leave it at that. I kind of hit all over the place. I had this script, but I didn't stick to it. But again, welcome. I hope y'all enjoy the virtual peer exchange, and please be sure to give us your feedback once the event concludes.
Thank you so much, Robert. So Robert Hyde is our chair for RPO America. And thank you so much for everybody typing your name and title in the chat box. Please keep it coming. Um, so RPO America is conducting this virtual peer exchange on what a rural transportation planning program is, how does transportation programs work in RPOs across the country, and learning experiences from RPO peers. So we'll have two presentations, and then we'll move on to the Q&A at the end. So I just want to give a little bit introduction about NATO. NATO is a national association for 540 regional development organizations, including emerging network of rural transportation planning organizations, RTPOs or RPOs. We help promote public policies that strengthen local governments, communities, and economies through the regional strategies, coordination efforts, and program expertise of the nation's regional development organizations. A little bit about RPO America. Like Robert mentioned, NATO Board of Directors formed RPO America in 2006 as the National Professional Network for Regional, Rural, Small Metro Transportation Professionals. Um, so same as Member Services Program within NATO. All NATO members are automatically also members of RPO America, and RPO America has a leadership group called the RPO Council. And some of you are part of the council too here. So I just want to give a little bit background of policy framework here. So the emergence of regional transportation planning. So the field of the regional level rural transportation planning has existed in a very small number of states since the 1970s, around the same time that many metropolitan areas were solidifying their approach to transportation planning through metropolitan planning organizations that were formed following the 1962 Federal Aid Highway Act. Rural transportation planning greatly expanded after Congress passed the IST, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act in 1991, with its emphasis on local participation, and the 1998 Transportation Equity Act T for the 21st century that elevated the role of rural local officials in statewide planning. The Federal Planning Regulation 2003 and again in 2007, after the 2005 Safety Lieu Act was passed, outlined the required process for non-metropolitan local official consultation in statewide planning. Recent history. So from the federal policy perspective, RTPOs were considered a stakeholder to the planning process, but they were not defined until the 2012 law, Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, MAP 21, which established a common set of tasks and institutional structures for the voluntary organizations. This provided a federal recognition with prescribed responsibilities and relationships. The nation's first RTPOs were designated according to the federal definition in 2016 um, in Ohio. Many other regional organizations also continue to conduct regional planning activities in non-metropolitan areas in support of statewide planning without the official RTPO designation. So this slide actually shows, the actual structure of the RTPO, where the policy committee acts as a fiscal agent. They deliver basic regional planning, technical assistant duties outlined in their tasks. They also do the outreach to local officials, separate from public outreach, and just giving a basic outline here for the state roles. They cooperate with RTPOs on the long-range transportation plan, consult with RTPOs on interstate projects in STIP, cooperate with RTPOs on other projects in STIP for areas with a population under 50,000, and consult with RTPOs on strategic highway safety plan. So here is a map, and there is a link here, which I guess Carrie is going to put in the chat box too. So that shows the existing transportation planning models across the country. RTPO's current structures and functions, usually found within an existing organization, could be an economic development district or regional planning organizations. They act as a fiscal agent and do administrative support, perform professional planning support, and policy board makeup. It's within the existing regional organizations board. Majority of local governments are included. Transportation, different sets of transportation mode operators are involved, and major stakeholder representatives like health, business, agriculture, emergency, etc. are all included as well. And state DOT, as far as I know, there could be as non-voting, but I see some of the states might have as a voting member as well. So what do RTPOs do? They assist the state with public outreach and outreach specifically to local government officials, support locals with the technical transportation issues in their communities. They prioritize local needs at the regional level, which has a larger voice. Um, so recently we have noticed some RPOs are including a new task that is more RPO focused. For example, First Tennessee RPO has included rural planning initiatives such as working on bike bed plans, access management studies, etc., as well as electric vehicle infrastructure planning and resiliency tasks to support with electric vehicle related planning and climate change issues. And Tennessee DOT has been supportive of this specific uh, task, and they have been helping the other RPOs across the state as well. With this introduction, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Have Chris Whitaker, Local Assistance Director from Region 12 COG in Iowa, and Jennifer O'Connor, Planning Director from Northern Arizona Council of Governments. Alrighty, the floor is all yours, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to talk about the RPO, the RPA here, and kind of our experiences in Iowa. So appreciate the opportunity. Again, I'm Chris Whitaker. I'm the local assistance director here at Region 12 in Carroll. I've been here for a little over 25 years and really walked in 1998 and like, okay, you're going to run the RPA. And I'm like, okay, what's that? So it's been a great learning experience, a lot of great partners. So I'd like to share that with you today. So we'll go on to this. We get started here, talk a little bit about the COG in general. So again, there's 18 RPAs in Iowa, covered statewide. Most of us are either a council of governments and the RPA. Some of us also run the public transit agency as well too. So there's a map of the RPAs in Iowa. A little bit about us. We're in very rural western Iowa. There's our 6 counties, ranging biggest city of 10,300 in Carroll, where I'm at today, and also our COG headquarters, to some of those smaller little burbs around the region of Aspinwall, Buck Grove, population of about 50 each, and everything in between. So next slide will show a little bit about the COG in general. Again, we were organized in 1973, celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. 6 counties, 56 cities. 2020 census had our population at 72,167. Currently, the COG has 2 divisions: the Local Assistance Department, which is the department I have the great pleasure of overseeing. We also run a lot of community development, economic development, revolving loan, housing, grant writing, pretty much everything a COG does, as well as the RPA. And we also operate the Western Iowa Transit, which was founded in 1977. So a little bit about the structure of the COG. We do have a 24-member policy council that meets 3 times per year. They really approve our big planning documents, our transportation planning work program, the TIP, and then the larger documents that we do prepare every 3 or 5 years: passenger transportation plan, transportation improvement program as well. Our executive board is 6 members, a supervisor from each of our 6 counties, and they meet monthly and handle really any amendments or minor changes to any of the documents referenced. So our advisory committees next, and they're very, very diverse in nature. Our technical advisory committee is made up of our 6 county engineers, our 2 large city engineers, populations of over 5,000. In our case, that's the city of Carroll and the city of Denison. We also have a voting member of our public transit rep, who is our transit director, and then ex officio representatives from DOT, federal highways, and the Federal Transit Administration. Really, and I will be very honest, the technical advisory committee meets probably 4 to 6 times per year. Those are still, after 25 years of doing this, those are still some of the 4 or 5 best days of me coming to work. I like working with the technical advisory committee. There's been probably 3 of those 9 members are our original technical advisory committee appointees. They're either been longstanding county engineers in 2 cases, or one of the city engineers has been with that city for 40 years. So a great group of individuals to work with. I think probably like all of your groups, maybe a little skeptical of the RPA process when it first started, but I think there was a lot of trust given and a lot of discussion back and forth, and those long-standing relationships really made that process better as time went on. So Transit Roundtable Committee meets a couple times a year, and this is really to provide input on all things passenger transportation related. Sheltered workshops, New Hope Village, empowerment agencies, the AEAs, community opportunities as a community action agency, private charter, and our ex officio members. Again, talk about all things passenger transportation related, tries to identify gaps in public transit and see if there's any coordination that can be done between the public transit and private providers as well. So they do provide up recommendations on our passenger transportation plan as well. So Bike Ped Roundtable, this was really a group that started probably 6 or 7 years ago. And it was really to talk about all things bike and ped related. 18 members, 3 from each county. Started with our 6 conservation directors, and then really 2 trail advocates from each county. In some counties, they were city managers, economic development people, or just trail people that really were concerned about trails and avid bikers or walkers. Provided good input on trail development, maintenance, and promotion. Assisted with our trail counts, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And really was a good roundtable for them to talk about ways to promote trails, needs for maintenance, ideas on maintenance, and then also funding. That activity we meet about with that group maybe annually anymore. So, but a good group to get some discussion going. County transportation stakeholders group. This really has changed over time. We used to meet annually with these groups, at least once or twice, to talk about our STP and transportation enhancements or transportation alternative applications. Great participation and membership varied greatly by county. It was usually 2 or 3 county engineer, maybe a supervisor, conservation person, just really got together and to talk about all things transportation. Some counties, there'd be 15, 16 people come to that meeting. There'd be every supervisor, the conservation director, half of the city reps from each county. They were very beneficial. This is one thing. One of the negatives that COVID had, we did try to do some of these online. Participation was terrible. Discussion was terrible. So we're kind of trying to get those restarted and kind of get a little more fire back in those as we get out of that staying at home and doing things all online. So that's enough about the transportation stakeholders. We'll move on from there. RPA tasks, what do we do? Probably things just like every RPO or RPA does. We do our transportation planning work program annually. We have our public participation process. And really, this is the catch-all category to me. When I talk to our board, it's like, this is not only public participation, talking about transportation projects and funding, but it's the technical assistance. It's meeting with cities, counties, highway coalitions, do some grants, do some advocacy work. We also develop our transportation improvement program. Each year we receive our target this year, I think, is about $2.3 million in surface transportation block grant funds for those types of projects. And then we receive about $220,000 in transportation alternatives program funds that we get to decide locally of where those dollars are invested in the region. So passenger transportation plan really deals with all things passenger transportation related, but really is, I think, the guiding force for the Western Iowa Transit, their capital improvement plans, their operations, and it identifies those transportation gaps or barriers to public transportation. Transportation data collection is another thing that we do. Recreational trail counts, traffic counts. And I can talk a little bit more about these in our special projects. Also develop a long-range transportation plan every 5 years, and then special projects as needed. Over the years, we've done a number of special projects, transit facility feasibility studies, traffic and trail counts, retro reflectometers, Simon inventories, recreational trail counters, solar speed detection signs, and corridor and traffic studies. And I'll kind of dive into a couple of these that have been maybe a little bit more fun or more challenging over the years. Transit feasibility study. Our headquarters is here in Carroll. We do have an operations center here and maintenance facility, which has been added on to 3 times for various reasons. One of them really was for transit specific. We did the feasibility study for that building. And then we have 2 satellite transit storage facilities, one in Denison and one in Jefferson. Those were really looked at to provide inside storage for 7 to 10 units, maybe a little bit of light maintenance, vehicle washing, and then operations and maintenance. Before and still to this day, operations in our 6 counties, we have drivers that take their buses home with them at night, and they're really dispatched out of their house from the Carroll headquarters. But the facility in Denison, 5,600 square feet. The one in Jefferson, very similar. We looked at location, size, and really the need there. So, and those are the 2 facilities today. Traffic and trail counts. This was really one of, I think, to me, our first big special project, which was really a collaborative purchase. The county engineers, the city engineers saw a need for good local traffic counts and traffic data. IDOT counts traffic in the state of Iowa, the 4 quadrants every year. So 5 of our 6 counties are done together, and then one of our other counties is done in another year. So we have traffic count data that's 4 years old. By the time we get it, it's usually 5 years old. It's a lot of data for the DOT to compile. So we purchased 8 tube counters and a turn count board, and really used that to collect the average annual daily traffic, looked at truck volume, speed, peak traffic data, and really was a good investment to get that localized data. One of our other projects, the retro reflectometers and sign inventories. Again, this was a collective purchase. Really, when everybody was talking about, retro reflectivity and how are we going to do this? Is it going to be a nighttime driving study? Are we going to measure these? Are we just going to replace all of our signs? We purchased 6 of those retro reflectometers using 80% STP funds. And then each of the counties or cities that participated provided the 20% local match. As a follow-up, we had hired 2 interns one summer, and then the next summer we hired 4 interns to do sign inventories for 3 of our 6 counties and then 1 of the cities. So there's a couple of our interns doing those sign retro reflectivity count right now. So recreational trail counters. This was another really I think a demand for data. This was the engineers really always, I think, you talk county engineers versus the trail people. It's like, oh, those trails, there's really a lot of usage. And I think the county engineers being skeptical is like, no, there's not. So it was really the need for data on usage of trails or lack of trail usage data. So the DOT does do some counts, but not very willing to share that data, which for whatever reasons. So originally we purchased 27 Trafex trail counters, 80% STP money, 20% match provided by the county conservation boards, cities, and some trail groups. Those serve their useful life. And after about 15 or 16 years, they are pretty much going to go in the dumpster. There's a picture of one of those right now on one of our recreational trails. That's what those look like. We do have 12 echo counters that are getting ready to be deployed, hopefully in the next coming weeks here. Purchase those with 80% STP funds. RPA special projects, they were all locally driven. They would either come from our technical advisory committee memberships, looking at traffic counters or trail counters or retro reflectometers from our local governments or from transportation stakeholders. We always do have that call for projects annually. When we're having a TAC meeting or policy council meeting, we always ask, hey, what are we looking for transportation wise as we develop our upcoming transportation planning work program for the year and try to incorporate those needs the best we can. So. A little bit about how we're funded. This is for FY25. As you can see, and these are all these funds are just the STBG funding is all decided locally. Again, we program about $80,000 in STBG funds for transportation planning. Get about $31,000 in FTA 5311 funds, and then the same target for SPR funding as well. Each of those funds requires a 20% local match, which is provided by the COG. And you can see what that's going to look like for 24 and 25 here next year. With that, contact information. I appreciate the time today to talk about the RPA and what we do here at Region 12. And I think there's a breakout session. Be happy to answer questions, or if you have questions later on, feel free to shoot me an email or look up my number and give me a call. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Jen.
Chris, that was really interesting. Thank you for sharing. It's always really exciting to hear what other people are doing. So well, I'm going to give the Northern Arizona take on that. I really like the level of detail you went into about your committees and funding. So hopefully mine will be, it's a little different, and hopefully it'll be complement your talk. So let me just straight down the time here so I can keep track of it. Okay, so I'm Jen O'Connor. I'm the planning director for Northern Arizona Council of Governments. We are the green area on this map. So we cover almost 50,000 square miles. So if you try and drive from one corner of the region to the other, it's about a 5-hour drive. So that's about 42% of the state. And we do have 2 small MPOs in the region. So Flagstaff metropolitan area and Central Yavapai metropolitan area. Those are our 2 obviously small urban communities made up of some big kind of businesses, large historic kind of communities, and colleges in those areas. So in terms of NACOG's board, we are represented by 22 cities and towns and 4 counties, and they make up our regional council as well as our technical advisory committee. The NACOG region includes a lot of kind of park, state and federal parklands, huge swaths of tribal lands. So if you look in the top right quarter/third of the state, where it's kind of light brown, those are both Navajo and Hopi Native communities. We do still support those communities, though of course tribal governments receive their own funds directly from the federal government. We also have a lot of popular tourist destinations. Perhaps you've heard of Flagstaff or Sedona. Sedona is one of our more popular destinations. So that some of our destinations are kind of have national and international appeal, and then some of our communities have very popular for our local kind of in-state outdoor entertainment, and that is in the southern parts of the region as well as up north into Page at the northern part. So if I were to describe Northern Arizona, I would say we have these huge, large swaths of open land, parks. We have our small towns. Some of them are kind of clustered together. We have huge unincorporated areas with even smaller communities that aren't represented on our board. And so we kind of represent those communities that are small towns and cities and counties. So we have a population of about 335,000. I think, and it is 4 counties. And I think the race and Hispanic origin piece is kind of interesting. Yavapai County, which is the southwestern county, is closest to the metropolitan Phoenix area. A lot of people move up there to retire. It's about 2 hours away to get to some of those communities. That's a mostly white and then a little bit of a Hispanic population. Coconino County is where we've got Flagstaff, Navajo Nation, the Grand Canyon. That's about 50% white, and then about 28% Native American. Apache County is farthest east. That is our largest Native American population. That's the Navajo Nation. And then Navajo County just to the west is kind of split. It's got a lot of the tribal lands up north, but then popular larger cities down south. So next slide. So we do have many tribal partners. I don't know how much time I'll have to talk about them today, but we really make an effort to engage them and encourage them to participate in our activities. They are, of course, not required to. We do have both tribes within our borders and then just outside of our borders as well. And I should mention the Navajo Nation is not just in Arizona, but is also in New Mexico, Utah, and part of Colorado. So that complicates matters even further. They have one Navajo Nation DOT with staff spread out across 4 states. So it's an interesting dynamic. Next slide. Our vision is that rooted in its rich diversity and history, Northern Arizona is a vibrant region to live, work, grow, and connect. And how we will get there is that we are responding to relevant and emerging issues through creative and collaborative services, planning, education, and advocacy. I should mention that we are housed within a larger organization. So we are one team of 3 people. We have one current vacancy. But our organization has about, 400 to 500 staff. We have the Area Agency on Aging. We have the Head Start program. We have an Economic and Workforce Development program. So we're just a very small part of what NACOG, or Northern Arizona Council of Governments, does. So I am the planning director. We also have a mobility and transit planner, and then another transportation planner. I have a couple slides here just talking about what are the challenges and barriers that we face to kind of give you a big picture understanding. So level of participation in our TAC and activities. We do have a lot of potential members with those 22 cities and towns and the 4 counties. And I think in general, we do get good participation. All of our meetings since COVID are hybrid. And so kind of in-person attendance tends to fluctuate, as you can imagine, with the size of our region. There's no way you're going to come to a TAC meeting if it's a 4-hour drive away. It's just much easier to do that virtually. And we do try and rotate our TAC meetings a few times a year to other parts of the region to make it easier for people to attend in person. The TAC does meet every other month. I think the bigger challenge, though, is that there is a lot of turnover at our smaller jurisdictions. I don't know if you all see that. And so when that happens, it's a lot of relationship building and training and helping them to understand the value that NACOG brings. So that, I think, just takes some time. And then, their participation is voluntary. So it's not like we can force them to attend. But I'd say in general, we get probably about 75% of our jurisdictions regularly participating in our activities. And because it's such a large region, it means that we are constantly having to prioritize where to spend our time and energy. You just can't do it all. Our elected officials also need to be educated on complex topics. I'm sure you all work with elected officials, and you know that they come with a wide variety of experience and knowledge, some having no knowledge about transportation infrastructure or interest really, and trying to educate them about the importance of safety and safety planning. And so, we try and do site visits to our jurisdictions and go out and spend a couple days kind of visiting all the jurisdictions in a certain region and meet with as many folks as possible. But given the size of the region, it is hard to develop relationships with every council member. It's just not possible. So it does matter kind of who wants to participate and who doesn't. Okay, other challenges or barriers. The available funding is too small. I was interested, I think Chris said that they receive 2.3 million of STBG funds annually. You'll see we receive about 1.8 for very different geographies. So I also noticed that their administrative funds are probably double what we receive here in Arizona. So a little bit jealous. And as I like to make the case across Arizona, our region is by far the largest, so we have the most travel for our team. The other challenge is that, and you'll see when I show you kind of how our TIP is broken down, sometimes the STBG funding just isn't enough. You know, it hasn't, that funding source has not increased in years, and inflation has just meant that jurisdictions struggle to find what kind of pavement preservation project can you do with $400,000? I mean, how much can you really accomplish? So we have to spend a lot of time helping them through that, helping them get a little bit creative about how to use their funding. And then our smaller jurisdictions, go back to the previous slide, they really have limited capacity, and I think that that's something I really want to focus on. I'm going to give you an example. The town of Eager, it's in the southeastern part of the region. It's a community that's been around for a very, very long time. In fact, the current mayor of Eager is Brendan Eager. So this is the type of families that you see staying in the region. The town is about 4,500 people. They're very enthusiastic. They want to participate, but even sometimes they'll get an HSIP, a safety project awarded. And then, you know, ADOT has strict rules. Well, if there's been inflation, the local jurisdiction has to cover that. Well, when you're a small town, trying to find an extra $100,000 or $500,000 just feels totally overwhelming when your sewer system is breaking down and you've got to prioritize. So, even once they're awarded funding, we still need to do a lot of hand-holding and help them communicate with ADOT. ADOT will just be like, well, are you in or out? And it's like, well, it's not that simple. Let's find a way to work with the town and help them understand what maybe, how can we be creative in procuring the service? Is there a different way to procure the light poles that they were awarded? Maybe is there a cheaper option? What if they install them themselves? So that's an example of, you know, the type of involvement that we try and help our local communities with. I did want to mention that we do have an organization in Arizona that does provide free grant writing services. It's called Local First Arizona, and it's just for rural communities who don't have their own grant writers. And so we've really been able to help our jurisdictions take advantage of that service. So next slide. Okay, so I kind of broke our activities into two different types. The first is what ADOT and USDOT tell us we have to do, and then some of the things that we have initiated or tried to do ourselves. So I'll move on to those. The first one on the next slide. Next slide. This is kind of what we're required to do, and Chris talked up a lot about these elements. I've mentioned the kind of rural consultation technical assistance that we do, developing the TIP, grant program coordination, functional classification and urban boundaries. We help our jurisdictions if they need to make changes to those. We're a liaison between the local agencies and ADOT for their project funding. Data acquisition and maintenance. We are not doing trail counters like in Iowa, but we are doing traffic counting, and I will talk about that a little bit later. And then just general transportation planning. There are three main types of funding that come into the region that we help our jurisdictions with. Surface transportation block grant funding. That's the federal funds that come into ADOT, and ADOT distributes them by population out to the councils of governments and MPOs. NACOG receives $1.8 million annually. It's kind of nice in Arizona. The state has set aside a pot of funding that's from the Highway User Revenue Fund, so that jurisdictions can exchange their federal dollars for state dollars, and thereby removing a lot of the cumbersome federal regulations that come with STBG. So you do have an option in Arizona to exchange your STBG funds for those state funds, and eliminate some of those burdensome regulatory requirements. And then, of course, discretionary grants that we're always trying to help our local agencies access through the bipartisan infrastructure law, as well as those available for this through the state, the off-system bridge program, highway safety improvement program, and transportation alternatives. On the next slide, you'll see there's been a new funding source that's became available in 2022. This is from our state legislature. They set aside a pot of money specifically to support our local rural local agencies in developing grant applications for the bipartisan infrastructure law. So you can apply to the SMART Fund for three things. One is you can get reimbursed for your grant development expenses up to 50%, so to cover the cost of your grant writer and other expenses. The second, which we're really trying to help our jurisdictions take advantage of, is you can get 100% of your design and other engineering services expenditures reimbursed. So you would apply, get awarded, hire the consultant, and then receive your reimbursement as they go along. The one requirement, though, is that you must apply for a bipartisan infrastructure law grants. And then if you apply for, say, if you decide to use a different source of money outside of the bipartisan infrastructure law, you do have to repay the design and engineering services funding. So you need to make sure that when you're picking a project to apply for the SMART Fund, you've got a clear target for bipartisan infrastructure law funding. And then also you can use the funds to cover your local match portion of the grant. This slide shows that there's $62.5 million that was set aside. There's been some interest earnings to date. So there's about 13 million in each pot of funding. There's 5 pots of funding. ADOT got a portion. Municipalities with populations under 10,000 received a portion. Municipalities of population over 10,000, counties under 100,000, and counties over 100,000. And so you apply, the State Transportation Board reviews your application and awards it, and then you receive the funding. So it's been very popular with our larger municipalities. And so we've been really working hard to encourage our smaller counties and municipalities to take advantage of the SMART Fund, and they're doing a great job with that. But that's another example of kind of some of the education that we do and a little bit of the hand-holding, helping them to navigate the SMART Fund process. And new to this year is that there was a legislation change that allowed COGs and MPOs and other anyone else who's eligible to apply for federal bipartisan infrastructure law funding to apply for the SMART Fund. So NACOG will be taking advantage of that in the coming year as well. So we do have about 1.8 million that comes into the region each year, and it gets divided by what we call subregions. So a subregion is the county and the cities and towns within it, and it's divided by population. So that's kind of a pie chart showing the distribution. NACOG uses a rotational method to distribute the funds. So we don't do an annual call for projects for this pot of funding. But we do a rotation. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit of how we do that. It's a little tricky to figure out, but you can see there's the heading of the subregion. So each subregion, there are 4 of those counties and subregions. And then within that, you can see the name of the jurisdiction and the amount that they get. Sometimes the way that we've designed the rotation is oftentimes a jurisdiction will get funding in year 1 and year 3. So in year 1, they can use the funding for design, and then year 3, they can use it for construction. So a good example is in the Coconino subregion, Williams, the town of Williams, which is on Route 66 and close to the Grand Canyon. It's kind of a visitor destination as well. They received 289,000 in fiscal year 24, and then the same amount in fiscal year 25. Springerville, on the other hand, is a neighbor of the town of Eager. They received 410,000 in fiscal year 24, and then another 410,000 in fiscal year 26. So it's a very complicated system, but we believe that it allows a kind of equity among our jurisdictions, especially those with smaller staff and capacities. It's very hard for them to even find a project to kind of get motivated. And so if we didn't use a rotation method, what we'd find is that some of the cities would probably just be the ones that take advantage of it and are able to participate. So it's our kind of way of leveling the playing field. Next slide. All right, so I know I'm coming up on the end. I'm just going to quickly go through a few more slides here. So we do have a traffic count program. It's in its 4th and final year. We actually hired a consulting firm to just manage it for us. And we help identify the count locations. These are counts that go above and beyond what the State Department of Transportation and the jurisdictions are to count. Next slide. We have a variety of NACOG initiated activities, and I'm just going to talk about one of them today, and that's our Regional Transportation Safety Plan. We update that plan every 5 years. I think you're probably all familiar with them, especially as we're trying to encourage our jurisdictions to apply for Safe Streets and Roads for All. So we just completed at the end of 23 our most recent update and worked to make sure that it meets all the requirements of an SS4A action plan. It's a data-driven study, so it looks at the crash data. But what I was really proud of through this process is the level of engagement we were able to get from our sheriff's office and police departments. So for each jurisdiction, we would offer to meet with them virtually to hear about what are their biggest hotspots and challenges that they would like to see addressed in the priority recommendations. And I can't emphasize enough how helpful it was to talk to the police and sheriff's departments and get their direct input. And then it was great to see that reflected directly in the end product of the plan. For each of the recommended projects, it would say where the recommendation came from. Was it from the crash data? Was it from the public involvement? Was it from the local jurisdiction and sheriff's department? And we just did find that we have much higher rates of fatalities compared to the statewide levels. And especially in Yavapai County, an area called the Verde Valley. It's made up of about 5 jurisdictions and unincorporated communities. And the rates were so much higher there, including the fatals, that we decided to pursue an SS4A grant and were awarded that last year. So we'll be doing a sub-regional transportation safety plan for the Verde Valley in the coming year. And the county just put in like doubled the money basically. So we'll even be expanding that into a master transportation plan for the region. So we're really excited about that. NACOG will oversee the project and the solicitation for the consultants. Next slide. Other piece that I really wanted to mention that we were excited about for our safety plan is that we had on staff a GIS guru, and we had him create interactive story maps for each jurisdiction. And the story maps are kind of a way that takes like a PowerPoint slide and incorporates it with a map that you can pop into and navigate. And so we had multiple maps on here where they could look at their crash data. So this is kind of the network screening. And then the next slide shows where the recommended projects were. You could click on each project, each point, and learn more about it. There was also a slide that showed the public input. We used the tool during public input where the public could interact with the map and drop a pin and tell us whether it was a vehicle or a pedestrian or a bicyclist issue. So they could also navigate the public input data through the story map. So those are all up on our website that people can check out. So I think we'll skip the part about tribal partnerships, that we are excited about those. And if anyone's curious about tribal partnerships, I'm happy to mention those. We are working towards a rural school bus route study. This was a project brought forward by the state transportation board chair at the time, who's also a member of the Navajo Nation. Some students are on the bus for about an hour and a half each day to get to school. And when there is excessive rain or snow, buses just can't traverse the dirt roads. We're looking to make a connection between the condition of the roadway and condition of the buses, students' abilities to get to school on time or at all, and then student outcomes. So can we make a connection between the student outcomes for their testing data and their struggles for getting to school? So we're excited about that project. We're looking for funding for that right now. And the next slide shows an example of what we're talking about, of the types of struggles that our buses have. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. I guess the last thing I'll say is that we are working with Kevin Adam at the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council. I think Kevin's on this call because he also supports NATO. Here in Arizona, this is the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, is a group of our rural and small MPO elected officials who help us to advocate for increased funding and support at the state level and federal level for more funding. And so we are working with RTAC this is our, I think, 4th year going into it, of developing a regional priority projects list. This is a list where we do a call for projects and jurisdictions submit their most important project. We make a list of, just for the NACOG region, of about $100 million worth of projects. And then those get added to a piece of state legislation that RTAC finds a champion for. We meet with our state legislators throughout the year and encourage their support for the legislation. And then usually what happens is that legislators kind of cherry pick off that list to throw projects into the state budget. So I think that concludes my comments. And if there's one last slide that I think is where we go from here, and I'll just mention that, keep going. That's the regional priority projects list, where the projects are located, going. One or two more. One. Okay, one more. So what we're looking towards, again, developing that priority projects list worth $100 million, that Verde Valley safety plan that's now going to be a master transportation plan. We'll continue our site visits and meeting with our local elected officials and staff. We have an ultimate goal of developing a long-range transportation plan. COGs are not required to have one, and we would love to have one. And so we're looking to find a way to fund that. As a partnership with our other COGs in the state. There are 3 other COGs in the state. And then we're also looking to pursue bipartisan infrastructure law funding. We're working right now with 3 Navajo chapters. The road through their chapters is an ADOT roadway, maintained roadway. It's a US route. And so trying to help them get SS4A funding to do a safety corridor study. NACOG would oversee it. The Arizona Department of Transportation and the chapters and the Navajo Nation DOT and the county would all be partners on this kind of joint effort that we're working on. So that's another exciting project that we have coming up. And that concludes my comments for today, and happy to answer any questions or be part of the discussion as we go on.
Thank you so much. And that's a lot. You guys are doing a lot there. In my prior job, I worked at a regional planning commission in Missouri, and just reminded me of all the tasks we worked there and possibly I could have worked on, but it's fine. Thank you so much, Chris and Jen.
Welcome.
So we're gonna open up for some Q&A here before we move on to the breakout rooms. Any questions for the presenters?
I put a prompt in the chat that folks can type questions if they have them, or unmute and ask them while folks are thinking of questions. I had a question for Chris. You mentioned that the COG supplies the matching funds that are required. Where does the COG source those funds from? Are those dues from your local governments? What color is that money?
We have a money tree out back.
Can you bring seeds to the next conference so we can all grow one?
No. No, in all seriousness, the 6 counties, our 6 county governments are our dues paying members. So that provides some of the local match requirement. We also have, some unsequestered or non-restricted funding that we get from, lump sum contracts that we use towards match, so on and so forth. So it's typically not a challenge for us to find the 20%. And I know that's probably a rarity.
Yeah, congratulations on that. We just passed a local assessment for our program. So this is something we've been working towards. There have been assessments to our jurisdictions for other programs at NACOG, but not for our regional planning program. So that is going to go into effect July 1st, and we'll bring in about $35,000 in the first year. We try to be very gentle. So for our smaller jurisdictions, we only ask like $750. But up to our counties, we'll get about $5,000. So we are excited to have some some free money to move around. Let's see what we do. We have lots of ideas, of course, of what to do with it, but to prioritize.
Jennifer, this is Jean McCullough with Bi-State Regional Commission out of the Quad City area, Illinois, Iowa. Wondered about the state program that seems to be incentivizing applications for the IJA funds. And what is it bonded funds at the state level? Do you know the kind of the source and how that came to be? And you did mention if a jurisdiction received funding for engineering and they applied, knowing that those funds are fairly competitive if they apply and they don't get it, and then they look for other sources, or do they have to keep continuing to apply?
They do have to keep continuing to apply for the bipartisan infrastructure law funding in order. Now, if they just never get it, they don't have to pay back the design and engineering funds. But if they go a different route, which seems a little harsh, but I haven't heard of anyone having to pay back their money yet. So we'll see on that.
That's good.
In terms of the how the funding works, it was a piece of legislation. So there was a time, post-COVID, that our budget was really flush. Our economy was booming, and so the state legislators had funding available. And some folks were getting a little frustrated that there was a lot of just felt like pork, like just your favorite project was getting funded. And this was a way to kind of more equitably distribute that funding. So they set up, it's a one-time pot of money. So once the money's gone, the program could end, though I would hope that maybe the state legislature would set aside another chunk of funding in a future budget.
Thank you.
We have a question for Chris in the chat box. So Chris, you mentioned how members were skeptical of the RPA when the RPA was first started. Like, how did your organization start building that foundation of trust? Or are there any certain types of projects you recommend to get members engaged?
Time. That's what it took. It's, we started, I think the RPA process in Iowa started in 94, 5. Gina's on here. She can answer that question better than I can, but I think, 95. And to be honest with you, I think the county engineers, and they admitted this to me before, they would have a meeting before our meeting to talk about what was going to happen. And I came along, and I don't know, and there was one of the engineers was in that photo helping set a trail counter. It was my good friend, Dave Paulson. Dave was Carroll County engineer for 35 years. He and I became friends about 6 weeks in my tenure here. My dad worked for the road department. So Dave, good county engineer. And we talked about that. And he's like, oh, so I gained some credibility that way. And it was just being, kind of trying to take care of them and make this not real intrusive on their process, but yet follow the DOT guidelines and follow the process the best we could. And, just over time, it was like, we get along pretty well and things are just fine. This works pretty good. So is there a silver bullet or a special project? No, I think those collaborative purchases, the trail counters, they saw some value in working in that scenario together. So that was a value add for them that they probably wouldn't have done alone. The retro reflectometers, some bought into that, some did not. They're like, what are the sign cops going to come get us from the federal highways if we don't do this? Then they're right. But, I think some of them really dived in there, and it was a good partnership, and it still is to this day.
Thank you, Chris.
That question about trust might be a good one for Jen as well, since you guys are have your first assessment. Just what kind of feedback your localities have had from this process of establishing the assessment.
We really made a point to explain to them how we've grown the program over the last few years, what additional services that we've been providing, like the GIS story maps. So we really put an emphasis on, hey, if we want to be able to keep hiring staff of this caliber, then we're going to need a little bit of support. And then also like, well, this is what you'll keep getting. These are the projects we have planned, like the Verde Valley Sub-Regional Transportation Safety Plan, the project on with the Navajo chapter. So trying to say, hey, we're really pushing ourselves to bring in additional funding. I think trust is hugely important. And it does take time to build. We've cycled through a few different of our transportation planners not staying more than 2 years, which was really hard because those relationships get developed and then you're back to square one. So those are hard positions to fill, especially if you don't have the salary that you think you need to attract the right type of candidate. So yes, we are constantly working to meet with our electeds and build that trust. I think it's easier to build trust with the staff because they kind of transition their staff and some of them, like Chris is saying, have been there for 10, 20 years. So I think the staff are a little easier to build trust with, and they immediately see the value, right? They're getting their STBG funds, or we're helping them apply for HSIP. So, yeah.
Thank you. I have a quick question. Jen, I think in your presentation, there was one slide that talked about the scoring criteria. Can you please explain a little bit more on that? I can go back to the slide if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So when the state legislature started showing this interest in funding using state funds to deliver to local jurisdictions, we decided to put together this regional priority projects list. And we wanted to make it very clear of how the projects would be scored. So even the application is designed based on this scoring criteria so that applicants know how their projects will get scored. So we developed this with our TAC. They're the ones that gave input. Of course, we did a lot of research on other scoring criteria that's used across the country. And so the 10% for local leveraging, so what is your community bringing to the table? That is a hot topic for our state legislators. They like to see skin in the game. They use that all the time. So we try to do at least 10%. A demand or need is where they really get to talk about why the project is important. Connectivity, we like to see, are you either connecting between communities or within your community? Are you, and how are you bringing people together? That kind of ties to the economic and social benefits. Are you providing access to employers? Are you providing access to local community colleges or social services? So that's the 20%. Safety is that roadway safety or intersection safety piece. So how can you demonstrate that it's going to, reduce crashes on our roadways? Alternative modes, we haven't had a lot of projects that fit into this category. We don't really have the trail and bike network that you see in other parts of the country. A lot of our bike infrastructure is very local, so getting around within your community. But we did want to encourage that, so that's the 10%. And then community support is both letters of support from the jurisdiction and from community groups. And then somewhere in there, we also asked to show where's your project been included in other planning efforts? So has this already been demonstrated as a need previous to this opportunity?
Thank you. I'm kind of surprised how safety had a scoring of 10% compared to the others.
It is interesting how that came out. I think now that we've just completed our safety plan, I bet there would be an interest in changing that. But if you take it from one, you gotta shift it to another. So yeah, it would be interesting to see. We've tried to not change things up too much. So we've just reused the same one. However, as we were looking towards a long-range transportation plan, I'm sure we would come back to this and talk about how it could be updated.
Sure, thank you. Any other questions? Ready then. Carrie, if you have breakout rooms ready for us, guess we are all ready to talk to each other.
Yep, we've got breakout rooms that I am going to launch in just one moment. I've put some discussion prompts in the chat that you will still be able to see once you get into the breakout room. once I hit open, we'll stop the recording and you'll see a button with an option to join the breakout room. Please go ahead and do that. You'll have some combination of today's speakers and NATO staff in each of your breakout rooms. And hopefully I've mixed you up enough so you don't already know half the people in your room. I tried to split you up geographically. All right, so we'll pause that recording and go ahead and start the breakout rooms and do some additional peer exchange with more peers. As we come back together, does anybody have any highlights from that breakout room discussion you'd like to share with the larger group?
Brock, can you please share about the RTPO designation that you got excited about?
Yeah, we're working towards some movement with some meetings with Oklahoma to be able to work with getting some RTPOs or with our RTPO and another potentially designated, and working with the process to be able to do a tip with that. Some of the pushback the concern has been, if we're that tip process, if we're going to have those things just seamlessly together in that coordination, because currently and like a lot of our RPOs, our policy board meets every few months, not necessarily every month, whereas they have a lot of changes to this tip every month. So that's some of the things that are kind of issues that we're kind of working through, but we are kind of excited to get to that next part to be able to work towards designation.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Well, our breakout room has the same issues that everybody has been going through. A lot of funding cuts, more work, less staffing. But I do have, I don't know if any of you, the breakout rooms discussed about a safety action plan. Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, they actually received funding and they got the safety action plan done for the whole region. And they are in the process of, I'm going to put the link here. They're in the process of looking to see how to implement on the projects from the plan. So we thought that's a cool one to share with the group here. Anybody else from other breakout rooms would like to share?
We were talking a little bit about funding sources to access when you don't have much funding at all. And we talked a little bit about safety planning being a good first step, a good way to maybe tap into the Highway Safety Improvement Program or SS4A, and do some smaller projects that way. Also off-system bridge funding. I don't know how it works in other states, but we've been having a lot of luck with that. We just got 100% funding for a total bridge replacement in one of our counties.
Great, thank you. Last call for any awesome stuff going around your region.
I'm dropping a couple more links in the chat for additional resources as we run out of time here. And there will be more opportunities to exchange information with peers this summer at our National Regional Transportation Conference in Greenville, South Carolina. And also in future virtual peer exchanges. We'll keep you posted.
Alrighty, then with this, I'm gonna close this peer exchange session. We will have a recording of this session on our website, and I'll make sure to send the link to the session in a week or so. Please reach out to Carrie, Brett, or me if you have any questions, or if you want to be part of any upcoming peer exchange sessions, or would like to be part of, a presentation at the NATO conference in July. With that, I'll close this session, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining. you have a nice day. Bye-bye.
So.